I'm in the middle of writing my sci-fi narrative, and I'm going to start writing my body paragraphs or my middle paragraphs that are the rising action and the climax. So I'm starting to build up my different sort of events that raise the tension, lead to the climax moment, and this is where the bulk of my story will take place. So we've already talked about sensory detail, and we've already talked about the narrative form. And so the next sort of piece we're going to add into our narrative as we're writing and adding content is transitions. So I have written my exposition, and I have all of these sensory detail pieces that I've added, highlighted in yellow here, in my exposition. Then I'm starting my body paragraphs, my rising action paragraphs. To start my rising action paragraphs, I'm going to add transitions. Transitions are words or phrases that connect ideas together, and in the case of a narrative, it makes the events flow together. And in the rising action, it adds tension and shows step by step how you get to the complexity of that climax moment at the very high, exciting piece of your narrative. So I have three body paragraphs or three rising action paragraphs started, and those come from my form, my diagram that I've written for my narrative. And so I'm moving from the beginning to the middle, and each of these middle pieces to the climax needs a transition to connect them together. Words or phrases signaling the connection between what just happened to what's happening now. So, my first transition that I've used in my narrative model is between the beginning paragraph and my first rising action paragraph. Um, my first rising action paragraph, which is right here. So I have a transition from my first rising action paragraph to my second to my third. So each body paragraph will take me to the next like moment of tension leading to the climax. Anyway, so I have my narrative all planned out. The first thing I'm going to do is look at my worksheet for narrative transitions. So I read my first event. Mandu appears and challenges Samson. They fight and Mandu retreats on his ship. So I want to transition that for that first rising action paragraph that kind of adds a little bit of tension because it's rising action, it's exciting, it's, building momentum of my story. So I want something that's like a little bit quick. That's just me though. So that's my thought process. So the one that I chose from this list that makes sense for my narrative and how I want to connect my ideas together is suddenly. So I just chose the word suddenly with a comma, suddenly, because the transition from my beginning to this first event is quick and the action starts really fast. And so I have that suddenly transition to signal to the readers that I'm moving at a different pace now. There's something exciting happening, and the events are changing. They're moving from the beginning of that exposition with all the sensory detail to my first rising action. As I'm writing, I'm also going to make sure that I'm looking at all those sensory detail pieces that I have planned. So I have about 5 here, and I know that I planned this taste sense with my first body paragraph. Um, with my first rising action paragraph. So all I'm going to do as I keep writing my content, I'm going to start the paragraph with a transition. So here I have my transition, um, and then I have some sensory detail. So I write my paragraph transition based on that little text box that I did in my narrative map. And I have that sensory detail. So I want to add that in from my plan. So I'm going so Samson rose to look him dead in the eye. And I'm just going to paste that plan for that sensory detail that I had on my other thing. So I just add that. So as I'm moving, I'm using my resources to write. I'm looking at my diagram that I mapped out. As I move through my paragraphs, I'm using transitions that make sense to me. The ones I've chosen are suddenly, almost as quickly, as soon as. Those are like quick, like transitions to show like the actions moving quickly, things are building and exciting. The other transitions that could be helpful are in just 5 minutes or an hour later, immediately, before the sunrise, after we visited our grandma, at the same time someone said something or they did something. And so utilize these phrases and words to help you start the beginnings of your paragraphs. And then as you're writing what would be in that paragraph that you've planned, make sure you're going and adding in those sensory detail sentences and phrases that you've planned out as well. So, goal for Rising Action is to transition between those events, add sensory detail. That's what we're working on so far. Thanks. Bye.